The Detroit Lions got some surprising news on Monday, and not in a good way. They lose a key contributor to their offensive line, and are the Lions going to regress? That's the biggest conversation around that Detroit team right now. We'll talk about that and a lot more coming up on Locked On NFL.
The new Locked On NFL. The madman Tyler Rowland is your double shot of NFL espresso, with the Locked On local experts on every major story. Get ready, Rowland is revving up. The new Locked On NFL starts now. Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome into the Locked On NFL podcast. I am not Tyler Rowland. I am Kevin Ostreicher, and we are bringing you shots of espresso today on the Locked On NFL podcast, and our local expert of the day, it is Lauren Cox. We are here, of course, on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And thank you so much for making Locked On NFL a part of your day and your first listen each and every single day. Free and available for you, all podcasting platforms. So in video form on YouTube, you can like and subscribe to the channel. In audio form, you can follow along and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. And we are 5 days a week here on Locked On NFL of NFL content. Thanks to all the everydayers out there, the first-time listeners, and if you're somewhere in the middle, thank you as well. And here today, of course, as we always do, we'll be breaking down all the biggest stories around the NFL with the help of our Locked On NFL experts, who today is Mr. Lauren Cox. Lauren, OTA's in full swing. Teams are getting excited for the regular season to kick back off in just a couple of months. And to me, it honestly feels like it's sneaking up quicker than everybody thinks it is.
Yeah, I mean, try and take advantage of it now before we get to, the end of June and early July when it's a little more dead. But I'll take whatever football we can get this time of year.
Yeah, I'm excited about it. And it just you take the little slivers while you can, like you said, but then it really ramps up over the next handful of weeks and months. Now, when it comes to contenders, everybody talks about the Lions, Lauren, and rightfully so. They had a great year last year. They won the NFC North 15-2, disappointing end to their year, but a lot of people expect them to again be one of the top teams in the NFC. But their path to doing that might have gotten a little harder on Monday as Frank Ragnow, their longtime center, announced his retirement unexpectedly. There's no sugarcoating it, Lauren. It's a massive blow to this Detroit offensive line. And honestly, when you look at it, there's a lot of conversations about Detroit maybe being a team that could regress this season. Do you agree with that notion?
I do. You have to wonder whether how much they knew this could be a possibility here. Because in his retirement, Ragnow said, he was trying to give it a go, but just his body wasn't right and he needed to, step away for himself and his family. So I imagine that Detroit had some idea that his body was a question mark at least, and maybe that's why they double dip on interior offensive linemen in the 2025 NFL draft. But even if they knew, it's going to be a massive hit, whether you're putting a rookie in there or they're going to move one of the veterans back on the inside. Jared Goff has had that connection of center and quarterback. That's such a key relationship on offense that I think gets overlooked, in being able to trust who's going to do the protections and what the calls are going to be at the line of scrimmage, and just kind of know what the other one is thinking so that everyone's on the same page. You lose your center along with your offensive coordinator and some key members of your coaching staff. It's a big loss that compounds the losses they already had.
And I think, too, when you look at some of their additions here, I mean, look, they signed guys like DJ Reed, Derek Barnes. They did lose guys, though, like Kevin Zeitler, Carlton Davis. They released Darius Smith. So adding Ragnow to that list of losses is a really tough blow. And Matt Derry over on Locked On Lions, he reacted to this news. So we'll hear what he has to say, and then we'll talk about those potential possible replacements for Ragnow, what it could mean for that connection, Lauren, like you said, with Jared Goff.
All right, folks, big news from Allen Park today is Lions All-Pro center Frank Ragnow has decided to retire. That's right. Ragnow, who did not attend OTAs last week, and there was speculation, was unhappy about his contract with 2 years remaining, has just decided enough is enough. He wants to listen to his body, as he posted on his Instagram page, and thanks the Lions for everything during this process, but he's just too banged up, too hurt, and has been through too much. So at age 29, All-Pro center Frank Ragnow retiring from the NFL and from the Lions. Tate Ratledge, whom the Lions drafted in the second round as a guard, also can play some center and did during OTAs last week. He's likely the favorite to at least be the center this year. You got to throw in Graham Glasgow in that mix as well, of course, who has experience at center. More on Locked On Lions coming up later today, right here on Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
I guess, Lauren, if there was a benefit to the situation for Detroit, it's that it happened now instead of in August, when maybe would give it a go during training camp. And then, 3 weeks before the season starts, all of a sudden the Lions, they now have to deal with that. So maybe you can get a guy like Tate Ratledge ready for the moment at center, or maybe it is a veteran like Matt said there. But regardless, I just feel like with the NFC North even being in the state that it is right now, where we have to remember it took the 18th week of the season for Detroit to win the division. Obviously, Minnesota had a great year last year. The Packers obviously are looking to improve. And I think for some people, Lauren, the Bears might be a dark horse to maybe sneak into the wild card with the roster that they have and maybe a year or two leap from a Caleb Williams. Is Detroit, to you, the clear favorite in the NFC North? Or do you think that, again, there are a lot more layers to this Lions team right now?
Yeah, I feel like they earned, and it's weird to say this with the Lions, but they earned some benefit of the doubt still. Like, we do need to see them fail before we can totally write them off. Like, they still have Dan Campbell, and notably for this conversation, one of the key assistants that they didn't lose to the Jets or the Bears was their offensive line coach, Hank Fraley. Like, he was highly sought after in this process. Everyone was trying to get him because the Lions have had such a good offensive line. So at some point, Lions fans should be allowed to trust the process at least a little bit here and see how it goes with a new offensive coordinator, that with some new coaches in there, but some guys being brought back from the previous regime. So I don't think they're going to win 15 games again. And I don't think they're going to be like runaway favorites for the NFC North, but like until we see them be bad, I think like the Packers, Lions, and Bears still have more to prove than it is that the Lions have to like disprove or unprove about themselves.
Yeah, and I think, again, 15 wins is tough to do every year. You cannot expect that from a team. So in terms of record, yeah, I'd probably expect a bit of regression. And again, with them trying to figure out how to pick up the pieces. And the coaching conversation also is a very good one because they did lose Ben Johnson and Aaron Glenn. But as you mentioned, a guy like Hank Fraley does make an impact and is still there to coach up a guy like a Tate Ratledge. So really important season for Detroit, Jared Goff. And again, the talent levels are off the charts with a lot of these players on the roster. Obviously still having Amon-Ra St. Brown and Sam Laporta, etc. Obviously Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery is the 1-2 punch there. We're not on here saying Detroit's going to be this like third place wild card team, right? They're going to be a contender, but what is there going to look like compared to last season? That's the big conversation. There is also that conversation about the team that represented the AFC in the Super Bowl last year in the Kansas City Chiefs. Obviously, Travis Kelce and Patrick Mahomes, each a year older. There are other questions surrounding that team. And Chris Clark over at Locked On Chiefs talked about the Chiefs defense and how they can be even better in 2025 because while their offense has been great, that defense has been severely underrated.
When you start looking at how Kansas City has been successful over the last several years, yes, the offense has been great. Yes, they've had Patrick Mahomes. He can make plays that no other QB can. But one of the biggest things that has been part of their success is their defense is able to get stops and be successful. And one of the things that they're going to have to do this year, and they have to get better at, is they have to get after the passer a little bit better. But they also have to take the ball away from the offense. That is one of the biggest keys if they want to improve on defense.
And to me, Lauren, I think a big conversation, it's going to surround their stars with Travis Kelce and Patrick Mahomes, but everybody watched that Super Bowl. Everybody saw the Chiefs just get beat down by the Philadelphia Eagles, who, by the way, were an incredible team and they deserved to win that Super Bowl, and they did it in dominant fashion. So I think that when you talk about regression for Kansas City, I think people saw that and they said, okay, man, is this the end of that? Obviously, Joe Thuney now has a new home. Lauren, you might know a thing or two about that and where he ended up. But again, it's like they lost a really solid offensive lineman who they asked to play everywhere last season with injuries and guys not stepping up. And they're going to rely a lot on that offensive line. But this might just be a new era for Kansas City where, yeah, their offense is going to have playmakers and really help them out. But it might be the defense that's the X factor for them moving forward.
Yeah, I think they don't get enough credit. I mean, they ranked 4th in points last year and 9th in yards allowed. They were a good defense, but at the same time, you lose, you lose Wharton on the defensive line there, Tershawn Wharton, and then Justin Reed at safety, and the other defensive lineman, Derek Nottie, on the interior. Like, yeah, they drafted Omar Norman Lott in the second round, and they added Jerry Tillery in free agency, but I don't feel like they, as much as they replaced guys, I don't think they replaced them at an equal level. So I have some concerns about that defense holding up the same way. And much like the Lions, I'm not going to doubt the Chiefs, but I am going to doubt that they win 15 games again in back-to-back years.
Yeah, look, me covering the team that I cover, I have to respect the fact that Kansas City has run through the AFC over these last 7, 8, however many years you want to go back for them. It essentially has been like, okay, AFC teams, here's this Patriots dynasty that lasts for like 50 million years, and all of a sudden you go straight from that into the Chiefs. There hasn't been a ton of parity. Now, luckily, at least on my side of things, the Ravens were one of those teams that were able to get the job done. But I do think that, Travis Kelce hasn't looked the same. And when I mean that, like, he's still a really good tight end, one of the best in the league. But at least from Travis Kelce standards, we have started to see like, oh, is he going to be able to get through a full season? Is his body the same? And look, he's old now, or older. It takes more for him to get through a season. And the Chiefs probably want to be a little more cautious with how they want to use him. They reloaded in the draft. I actually liked their draft a lot, but you mentioned some of those vets that they lost on the defensive side of the ball. We also know, Lauren, they won a lot of one-score games last season. Whether you want to call it the luck factor or the Chiefs know how to play in those games factor, it is unlikely that the Chiefs get that lucky, quote unquote, lucky in those one-score games. And I think the fact that in the AFC, you have teams like Baltimore and Buffalo who are chomping at the bit to get over that Kansas City Chiefs hump, and along with some other underrated AFC teams. Look, the Chiefs are still the team to beat in the AFC to me, and there's not a doubt in my mind about that. But, in terms of how much longer they have, it all rests on Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce's shoulders. But to me, I think the conversation is how long can they extend that window with the other players, both offensively and defensively?
I think the key difference for me between the Lions' threat of a regression and the Chiefs' threat of regression is that the Chiefs have the same offensive coordinator, or offensive play caller and defensive play caller for the last 6 years with Spagnuolo and Reed. The Lions have to overcome coaching changes. That one to me is more of an obstacle that I'm skeptical about.
There are a lot of different ways that teams can regress or even progress. And coming up in the second part of the show, a couple of teams are hoping that their young quarterback can help them take the next step. So we'll talk about J.J. McCarthy and Anthony Richardson and where those two are in their timeline. So stay tuned. A lot coming up on Locked On NFL. First, this show is brought to you by LinkedIn. As a small business owner, your work doesn't end when the clock hits 5. Your business is always on your mind, which means when it's time to hire, you need a partner that works just as hard as you do. That's where LinkedIn Jobs comes in. When you clock out, LinkedIn clocks in. LinkedIn is your one-stop shop for everything when it comes to jobs and hiring. LinkedIn has helped me out a ton over the course of my life, and I have friends who use LinkedIn to hire for their companies, and they are more than thrilled with what LinkedIn has done for them. LinkedIn makes it easy to post job free, share it with the network, and get qualified candidates all in one place. And LinkedIn has a ton of features, whether it be helping you write job descriptions and getting your job in front of the right people with deep candidate insights. LinkedIn has it all. And you can also add the hashtag hiring frame to your profile picture. Double your reach to qualified candidates. No wonder 72% of small businesses say LinkedIn helps them find high quality hires. Post your job for free at LinkedIn.com/LockedOnNFL. That's LinkedIn.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Back here on Locked On NFL, Kevin Oestreicher and Lauren Cox talking football with you here as we do every day on the Locked On Podcast Network. You can start it off here with Tyler in the morning with a double shot of espresso, and then you can step into the barbershop in the afternoon with Tony Wiggins, where he chops it up every single day as well. Now, Lauren, let's talk about the NFC North again. J.J. McCarthy is stepping into the spotlight in Minnesota, missed his entire rookie season. Sam Darnold parlayed that into a heck of a contract with the Seattle Seahawks and that Minnesota team, which almost did take the NFC North from the Lions. They just couldn't get it done in that Week 18 game. J.J. McCarthy has a lot on his shoulders in year technically 2. It's technically his first year playing, obviously. But Luke Braun over at Locked On Vikings had just an update on McCarthy, what he's being asked to do at OTA. So let's hear what Luke has to say, and we'll react to it on the other side.
And it sounds like, McCarthy has known some stuff and not known some stuff. And that's like the point of this part of the offseason is to iron out those, is to exactly identify those weak areas and then, fill them in. So great. That's all fine. That all seems according to plan. The point is, They are going through the teaching process they want to be going through with JJ McCarthy. He's building that chemistry, that hashtag chemistry with Jefferson and Addison and Hawkinson, the way that you hope that he is.
No, we got some hashtags in here. Hashtag chemistry from Luke over there. But I think Luke's exactly right, Lauren, where you have if you are a young quarterback, Minnesota's situation right now, to me, is the one, and Chicago's another one as well with Caleb Williams and how they have kind of gotten weapons for him. But over in Minnesota, I think with guys like Aaron Jones, Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, TJ Hawkinson, and the investment they made in their offensive line, you can only take so much away from OTAs, especially for a young quarterback who's trying to learn the ins and outs of the game. There's no contact and you're trying to figure out some things. But to me, I think that JJ McCarthy is in an awesome situation, but with that situation does come a lot of high pressure expectations considering the rest of the roster around him.
Yeah, I think McCarthy's an interesting situation because he was hurt. It feels a lot more like a rookie season than, say, a quarterback who was intentionally sat for an entire year. I mean, think about Jordan Love, Aaron Rodgers, although those were much longer than just 1 year. But the point being is like, yes, he'll be a year ahead in terms of the actual play calling and terminology of the offense. But in terms of building that chemistry with Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison, and even just the snap exchange with a new center in there with Ryan Kelly, there's physical aspects of playing quarterback that you can do the mental reps while you're injured on the sideline as much as you can, but not being out there even as a backup practicing every single week. He's behind where a second year quarterback might normally be in that regard. So there's going to be some catching up to do, and perhaps as a result, more of a learning curve because he really does feel a lot more like a rookie than a first year starter.
And you and I talked in the first segment about how competitive that NFC North is going to be. And if JJ does need some time, which is natural, by the way, it's not anything against JJ. It's just hey, if the Vikings start out slow and then the Lions, boom, they're hot. Packers, boom, they're hot. Maybe Chicago, boom, they're out of the gate fast. And then Minnesota might be lagging a bit behind. That puts them behind the eight ball, puts even more pressure, more expectations. So it is intriguing because I think Minnesota's roster, they, to me, have one of the best off seasons in the league with how they address their trenches. But obviously, I think their season is going to hinge a lot on how ready JJ McCarthy is. And that answer right now, Lauren, is really just we don't know that answer.
Yeah, you have to feel like at least it's as good of a situation for a young quarterback to where you take out a lot of the excuses then. I mean, you have yes, he's new excuse, but what we've seen with another quarterback we're going to talk about with Anthony Richardson, for example, where it's his offensive line was injured or he was injured or his receivers were out, or, you could always kind of point to something to say, well, maybe that's the reason why it didn't work. So let's give it more time. But with McCarthy, I guess, injuries can still happen to the supporting cast, but as it stands right now, he's got the receivers, he's got the O-line, he's got the backfield, he's got a defense that looks pretty good. Everything should be set up where the Vikings will get a clear evaluation of what McCarthy is and isn't capable of.
And speaking of Anthony Richardson, let's move on and talk about him, where he's a player that coming out of Florida, everybody knew the ceiling was super high, but he was a raw prospect coming out of school. He was going to need some time, need some experience. But the Colts kind of threw him into the fire immediately and said, hey, we want to see what you have right now, which I think, Lauren, is a whole different conversation about. It just feels like that is how more and more teams are handling these situations, even when that quarterback clearly is not ready. And it was a tumultuous season for Richardson last year where he gets the starting nod. Then he's benched for Joe Flacco, and the Colts say, yeah, this is going to be a long-term thing. And then a couple weeks later, Richardson is back to being the guy. Obviously, in that is the whole him tapping out with his helmet. He's tired and admits to being tired on the field. This seemingly to me, Lauren, might be the last chance for Anthony Richardson in Indianapolis to really show that he has at least the potential to be the guy, because, man, if it goes south again, they have Daniel Jones this year as the maybe backup. I mean, it's a competition for them right now. Daniel Jones could realistically win that job. Where are you on him right now with Anthony Richardson and kind of what his future could be?
Yeah, I have a lot of experience covering teams that are trying to figure out whether a young quarterback is good or not. I've done that the last couple of cycles here. And I think with Richardson, it gets to this point where even if you can find a lot of, not even excuses, but maybe even justifiable explanations for why things haven't gone. I mean, he was hurt for a lot of his rookie season and in an lineup wasn't taken care of super well by the coaching staff or whatever. Really good, like truly good quarterbacks, after 3 years, you find a way to overcome. Like, you can usually just tell. There are very, very, very rarely the example of a guy who he just needed that 5th or 6th year before he finally figured it out. And even then, it's, Geno Smith or Sam Darnold. It's not, Josh Allen, Joe Burrow. I mean, even Josh Allen, it was year 3 was the year that things really clicked. And even then, you could kind of see some of that stuff coming together when you got the right coaching staff and everything. So it's like, this is it for Anthony Richardson. As much as, maybe there's going to be an injury or something this year too, that, well, we give him one more year. It's like, no, after 3 years, as much as we want to be patient and give them time, like, the really good quarterbacks overcome. They just find a way, because that's what separates them from the lesser quarterbacks. And this is his time to put up or shut up.
Yeah, I still can't get the whole tapping out thing out of my head with him. And again, like, credit to him for admitting to it, but also just like, say anything else. Like, say anything else, please. Like, I think that is like the one time where it's okay to just be like, yeah, I just, something was going on. Just don't actually admit to it. Like, that was, I don't know if you felt the same way, Lauren, but I was like, you probably just shouldn't have said that out loud.
Yeah, it's tricky because, you want a guy to be honest, and you can appreciate some of that, but also, like, I don't know. I also feel like, I don't know, one situation in one game is that the biggest infidelity, in this relationship. I don't think he cheated on you in this relationship, but maybe he was flirting with the waitress. So it's like, well, I don't know. Like, he didn't do, he didn't actually go all the way there. He just was one play tap out. Like, if he's good, then it's fine and it's not a big deal. And if he's bad, then it's a big deal. And it's more like, this is more like a symptom than the actual problem itself.
Yeah, that brings me to the saying, winning cures everything. And if they were winning, if he was good, like you said, you're right, it's probably not as big of a deal. But we have Zach Hicks and Jake Arthur over at Locked On Colts. They gave an update on Anthony Richardson and Daniel Jones at Colts OTA. So we'll see what they have to say, and then we'll talk about it here on Locked On NFL.
If you guys read my notes over on Horseshoe Huddle, you kind of ran the gamut of the Anthony Richardson experience in this one. You really saw just about everything you would expect to see from him. He had some scrambles early in practice. You could tell he was being really intentional about his like footwork and mechanics and everything, and things were looking good. He was ripping the ball downfield, and there were several chunk plays right off the bat. Will Mallory, Tyler Warren, things were looking good. And then, about the back half of practice, you saw things start to dwindle a little bit. We'll discuss here in a moment the way they're divvying up the snaps between him and Jones. But basically in the back half of the practice, Jones took over the first team reps to give both guys an opportunity to get some of those. And Anthony just kind of started to probably stray from his mechanics a little bit and get more into like the backyard football ad lib stuff that we see.
Look, this is an open competition, it feels like. And, if Richardson wins that job, goes a month and really struggles, it feels like this could just be the Daniel Jones show the rest of the way. But, if Daniel Jones wins that job, it just feels like a lose-lose for Richardson, where it's just like the doubts all of a sudden, nope, he couldn't even beat Daniel Jones. Like, it's over. It just feels like there's the only way Anthony Richardson wins is if he just shows monumental improvement, holds that job for all 17 games, and does show the Colts that he can be their franchise guy. There's no really in between here for me.
Yeah, I'm with you there that like Daniel Jones shouldn't present some insurmountable competition for him, right? It's not as though they used a first round pick on a quarterback where everyone kind of knows the writing's on the wall and Richardson's just staving off the inevitable loss here. Like, he should be the better quarterback. And I hesitate to like put too much stock in OTAs where like that's usually the time when players want to try different things. And this is the time to make mistakes to see what you can and can't get away with. So we'll know more once training camp comes around. But part of Anthony Richardson's value is the big size and physicality that you're not going to see in offseason practices anyway. So I think Richardson will get the nod to start the season, and then we'll know after a handful of games whether this is going anywhere or whether the Colts' whole season is probably, not long for this one.
Yeah, there are some AFC teams that I'm just so intrigued by because it could all go so well or it could all just crash and burn. And we'll talk about a team in the AFC that has an intriguing decision to make, and then also a team in the NFC that has a decision to make on a certain position group that has been a little bit lacking over the last couple of seasons. So stay tuned. Plenty coming your way on Locked On NFL. Back on Locked On NFL with Lauren Cox. I am Kevin Ostreicher, diving in to all of your NFL content over here on the show. And Lauren, the Miami Dolphins are a team that I have been so in on them for the last couple of seasons. I've thought that they built their roster really well. I thought that they did go very veteran heavy, but that was going to be enough to maybe sneak into a wild card spot. And it just really has gone south for them, where the expectations have been high and the results have been not good. They are in flux right now. It seems like there's a new Tyreek Hill storyline in terms of the trade every single month. Is he going to stay? Is he going to go? Seems like Jalen Ramsey is on the way out at some point here. Now, Jonnu Smith, there are beginning to be rumblings about him. I think the Steelers are a team that are potentially interested as they look to maybe add another offensive playmaker to their offense that currently does not have a quarterback. That's a conversation for a different day. But Jonnu Smith wants to stay in Miami. His agent, Drew Rosenhaus, releasing a statement, and we'll get the lowdown of that from Kyle Krabs here at Locked On Dolphins, who will tell us about that. And then Lauren and I will talk about if it's the right move to keep Jonnu Smith or if they should try to get value now.
Jonnu Smith wants to be here. And I want to start with what Drew Rosenhaus had to say. But I will say on behalf of my client, Jonnu would definitely like to stay in Miami. That's his first choice. This is where he lives in the offseason. He had a record-breaking season last year. It was the best season ever for a Miami Dolphins tight end. He broke the team record for receptions, receiving yards, and touchdowns for a tight end, and was the team's single Pro Bowl player. He's an incredibly valuable part of the team. He went to college at FIU. His dream team is the Dolphins. Hopefully everything works out where he can stay in Miami.
Jonnu was awesome for them last season. 88 catches, 884 receiving yards, and 8 touchdowns on the year. Was his best year by far as a pro. And he gives that offense a lot of juice. He's a very versatile player as well, but it does beg the question, Lauren, is this Dolphins team going to be a competitor this year? Are they in the conversation? Obviously, everybody looks at that AFC East. That's Buffalo's division. I don't think there's any question about that right now. But when you talk about maybe wild card spots, getting into the postseason, is that something that they're going to do? Or if Pittsburgh comes along and offers like a third or a fourth for Jonnu, is that enough if Miami feels like they're not going to compete to move off of a player like that? But there also then is the other part of it where, you want to do right by your players. You don't want to develop a reputation of just giving away guys, when the going gets tough. So do you think that the Dolphins should take the approach of, hey, we're going to try to compete this year? Still, they could also hold on until the trade deadline and say, hey, if he's available, if we're not doing well, we can make him available and maybe have that happen? Or do you think they should just move off of him while they can?
The problem is they don't really have a good alternative option if you do get rid of him. And it's a tough sell on your team if you get rid of a good player for draft picks or whatever and say, hey, like, we're going to choose to get worse and we're going to roll with Pharaoh Brown as our number 1 tight end. This sounds like, but at the same time, like, I don't think they're in a position where they should like pay him some big long-term contract. I mean, he's about to turn 30 years old. I know he's just coming off the best year of his career, but like, to me, a lot of it was more about just the volume and the role he played in that offense with everything else going on there. They just fed him the ball a lot. He had 111 targets or whatever for 800 yards, but like, it wasn't like his yards per reception was anything crazy for his career. I mean, it wasn't a career high in yards per reception. It's about the same average catch percentage for him. Like, he was just getting the ball more and doing about the same level of work with the ball as he had done throughout his career. So like, to me, it doesn't feel like he personally like elevated his game to some massive new level. They just used him more than any other team has used him before. And that was very successful for them. And it's good for everyone involved. But like, this isn't a player that's all of a sudden twice as good as he was a year before. They just used him twice as much. So I don't think it's a smart investment for the Dolphins. And if someone would give you a good draft pick for him, it's like, well, maybe you kind of sell high here because you don't know that he's going to be able to keep that up. But I suppose if you end up trading Tyreek Hill instead, then he's still a number 1 option or a top option in your offense, and then he gets the same usage again. So the Dolphins are in a messy spot.
It's not great for them. And again, this is the last year of Jonnu's contract. So if he has another somewhat good season, even along the same lines as he had last year, which would be a very good season, you definitely risk either you have to pay him a whole bunch of money. And like you said, does he deserve that money? He would deserve it based off of his stats, but is he a better player than he was? Or you just lose him for nothing or just a comp pick if it qualifies for it. So I agree with you, where I think that they probably should sell high, but the only issue, like you said, is, well, how do you sell that to the players of, yeah, we're not really going for it this year. The writing's on the wall. That's a tough message to, especially when a guy wants to be there. Like, you want to have guys that want to be on your team. And it's tough when that, you move off of a guy that has that desire.
Well, and I think if you're Mike McDaniel, if you're feeling like your seat is hot at all, then you're not trading away your number one tight end. Like at the end of the day, it might be what's in the best long-term interest of the Dolphins, but you as the coach, and I don't know if the general manager, Chris Greer, I don't know how hot his seat may or may not be, but like if there's any rumblings of like, we need to win some games so I don't get fired, then we're not trading the tight end. Sorry.
Yeah, and that's what happened last year where the Ravens and Dolphins had a deal apparently for Calais Campbell, or they were talking about it, and Mike McDaniel stepped in and said, no, I want to keep Calais. And the reason why, obviously, is because you want to try to compete. You want to win. And, it's not like Mike McDaniel has the coldest seat here. There is some warmth to his seat in Miami right now. So he's in the business of wanting to keep good players. I understand that. But I think it's one thing to have the best interest of the coach and then the best interest of the organization long term. Now, for the Dallas Cowboys, they made a big trade recently, getting George Pickens from the Pittsburgh Steelers. They added him. CeeDee Lamb finally has a partner in crime after a lot of years of not having one considerably. I think it's a great move for the Cowboys, but the running back room, it's been a question for them. Now, they added a couple of veterans in the offseason. They brought in Javonte Williams. Miles Sanders is also there. They have a couple of young guys that can also contribute. But, Lauren, this offense has the potential to be really good with Lamb and Pickens, Jake Ferguson. Obviously, if Dak can have a good year, that's probably what this all hinges on. They lost Zach Martin in the offseason. That's a big loss for their offensive line. But, man, if there's one thing that we can rely on as the Dallas Cowboys and drafting offensive linemen and making those offensive linemen into absolute stars. So feels like that running back position is really the only weakness on that offense right now. How do you feel about a guy like Javonte Williams maybe having a resurrection of his career over there in Dallas?
Yeah, I feel like after what we saw Rico Dowdle be able to do last year behind that offensive line, that Dallas should feel some confidence that, it doesn't have to be Javonte Williams alone rushing for 1,000 yards, but like that combination of some combination between Williams and Jaden Blue and Miles Sanders, that they can collectively form a group that rushes for, 1,500 or 1,700 yards. And maybe it's, Williams at 800 and Blue at 600 and, Sanders at 400 or whatever, but like they can have a good running back by committee and a good running game to support Prescott there without it having to be one lead special back. Like they decided a while ago when they didn't want to pay Ezekiel Elliott again, like that the strategy was not paying running backs. They let Pollard go. Now they let Dowdle go, and they'll say, hey, we'll just keep cycling players through there because we can trust this offensive line to be drafted and developed well.
Yeah, well, you have Marcus Mosher and Landon McCool over there on Lockdown Cowboys. They talked about the Cowboys running back room and what to expect from it and guys that they are excited to see. So we'll hear what they have to say, and then Lauren and I will talk about it.
I think of all the running backs on the roster, the one that we feel the best about being on the roster is Jaden Blue, and he's the one that we probably feel the best about what his role is going to be. So of the two veteran running backs, Javonte Williams and Miles Sanders, which one fits with Blue better?
I mean, I kind of feel like if you're looking for someone who's close, like if you're trying to pair him with somebody that's the opposite of what he is, I think Javonte Williams works better as a pairing in a thunder and lightning scenario. But if you're trying to, instead assemble your running back room where you have like three running backs that are all of very similar type, because I think what makes Miles Sanders good is that if you can get him to the second level, he can beat guys. He can beat linebackers with his feet and with his safeties with his feet, make them miss.
I think it's a really intriguing trio that they have in Dallas. And like you said, like Marcus and Landon said, it doesn't have to be this bell cow, and it's not going to be, especially with the guys on their roster. And like you said, with Ezekiel Elliott, they also had a shot to maybe pay Derrick Henry last offseason. They decided not to do that, and they tried to bring Ezekiel Elliott back, which just was a disaster in the first place when they tried to do that. So I just feel like for Dallas, Lauren, there's so much potential on that offense. But when you talk about like the X factor position, to me, I look at that running back spot.
Yeah, to me, I'm always been a little bit underwhelmed by Javonte Williams, and this running back room feels a little bit to me like when they say, if you have two quarterbacks, you have none, and it's like, well, if you have three running backs, maybe you don't have any. Like sometimes it's like you have three great running backs, and it's like, wow, how are we gonna have enough carries to go around? I think of the Chargers when they had LT and Michael Turner and Darren Sproles, and it's just like, whoa, this backfield is loaded. And with Dallas, it's like we got three or four guys, and we hope one of them's good, and we'll figure out, and I've watched the Chicago Bears firsthand try that strategy at a number of positions over the years where it's just like it doesn't, if you're counting on somebody to be better than they've been, it's very risky and usually unlikely that someone is great. But at least running back is one of the spots where, because you can get play out of multiple guys at the same time. It's not like they have to take turns of like when you're trying to find a left tackle and it's like you have guys competing there and you can only use one at a time. So then you're mixing them in and out. It's like kind of tricky there. Like with running back, at least you can have a healthy workload there that you can try and squeeze the most out of multiple players instead of having them kind of being all or nothing with one guy.
I'm also very impressed with how the perception of the running backs position has changed in just a calendar year, where, with guys like Saquon Barkley, Derrick Henry, Josh Jacobs, and even guys like DeAndre Swift and some of those lesser running back contracts signing last offseason, and the production that most of those guys gave, it became a position where everyone was talking about it last year. Oh, this is a position that you can just put anybody in there and it'll be fine. Don't invest in running backs. And now you have massive extensions for Barkley and Henry, and that position in general has a lot more respect than it did last year, which I think is personally really, really awesome. But Lauren, appreciate you chopping up with me here over on Locked On NFL. That's all we have here on today's show. But of course, you can check in later today with Tony Wiggins in the barbershop, and then right back here tomorrow morning, Tyler Rowland on Locked On NFL in the morning, giving you that double shot of espresso. So be sure to stay tuned for that. Thank you to everybody. Hit the like and subscribe button. We'll see you right back here soon on Locked On NFL.